My name's Tyler. I'm 31. And if you told me a few years ago that success could destroy your family faster than failure ever could, I probably would have laughed. I thought money healed things. It fixed bills, soothed arguments, gave people room to breathe. But apparently, in my family, it just made everyone greedy enough to stop pretending they cared. I grew up in a small town where gossip traveled faster than light, and everyone somehow knew what brand of cereal you bought that week. My parents, Mark and Linda, weren't bad people when I was a kid. We weren't rich, but they worked hard and always talked about sticking together no matter what. They said, family first, like it was our family motto. I believed it back then. I'm the oldest of two. My younger brother, Ryan, is 4 years younger than me and, to put it kindly, has always been the golden one. When we were growing up, he'd get praised for breathing correctly while I got lectures for getting a B instead of an A. If Ryan forgot to do his chores, it was because he had a lot on his mind. If I forgot, I was lazy and ungrateful. I remember one summer when I worked part-time at the local grocery store to save up for a used car. Ryan borrowed half my savings to start a small online business. 2 months later, he'd spent it all on sneakers and concert tickets. My parents called it a learning experience. I don't think I realized just how deep the favoritism went until I left home for college. I got into a good university on scholarship. My parents were proud, but mostly because they could brag to their friends about it. Ryan didn't even apply to college. He said school wasn't his thing, and they just nodded and told him college isn't for everyone. When I graduated, I got a decent job at a marketing firm, slowly worked my way up, and eventually landed a position at a tech startup in the city. That's when things started to change, mostly because the money started to show. My parents still lived in the same town, same house, same routines. I'd visit every few months, and every time, the conversations would circle around Ryan's latest big plan. He tried day trading, then selling fitness supplements, then starting a travel blog, even though he barely left the state. Each time, he'd quit within months. My parents would sigh and talk about how the economy's hard right now. Meanwhile, I was quietly building a career, saving, trying to build something that felt like stability. Then last year, something big happened. After 7 years of grinding through long nights, bad bosses, and endless caffeine, I got promoted to vice president of marketing. It came with a 6-figure salary, stock options, and my own corner office. I remember sitting in that glass-walled room on my first day, staring at the skyline, feeling this surreal mix of pride and disbelief. I called my mom that night just to share the news. I thought she'd be proud. At first, she was. She gasped, congratulated me, told me I'd always been destined for great things. My dad even got on the phone, which was rare, and said, "I'm proud of you, son." It was a nice moment, short-lived, but nice. Then, 2 weeks later, I got a call from my mom again. She sounded unusually sweet. Too sweet. "Honey," she started, "you know your brother's getting married soon, right?" I didn't know. Ryan had been engaged to his girlfriend, Emma, for almost a year. I liked her. She was kind, smart, and far too good for him, if we're being honest. They were planning a spring wedding, and I figured my parents would handle most of it since Ryan wasn't exactly known for having money. "Yeah, Mom," I said. "That's great. How's the planning going?" She sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh that said, "I'm about to make this your problem." Then she said, "Well, not so great, honey. Your father and I have been talking, and with how expensive things are, it's been really stressful. Ryan doesn't make much, and we want to make sure he has a beautiful wedding. Family deserves that." "Of course," I said carefully. "I'm sure it'll be great." There was a pause. Then she went for it. "So, we were thinking, since you just got that big promotion, maybe you could help out a little. You know, chip in for the wedding. Nothing too crazy." I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "Well," she said quickly, "the venue Ryan and Emma really love is about $25,000. But you're doing so well now, and family comes first, right?" I literally thought I misheard her. "Wait," I said. "You want me to pay $25,000 for their wedding?" "Don't say it like that," she snapped. "It's not their wedding. It's a family celebration, and you can afford it." I remember sitting there in silence, feeling this weird mix of disbelief and anger. It wasn't even a request, it was an expectation. Like my success somehow transferred ownership to them. I tried to stay calm. "Mom," I said slowly, "I worked hard for my money. I'm not paying for Ryan's wedding. I'll give them a nice gift, but that's it. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Tyler, she said, her voice tight. You wouldn't even have that job without us. We raised you, we supported you. Ryan's your brother. You're supposed to look out for him. What kind of son refuses to help his family? That's when I realized it wasn't about Ryan at all. It was about control. My parents had always seen me as the responsible one, the good kid, which meant they thought they could guilt me into fixing everyone else's mess. I told her, as calmly as I could, that I wasn't changing my mind. That's when she hung up. 2 days later, Ryan called me. Dude, he started. Mom said you're refusing to help out with the wedding. What's your deal? You're literally rich now. I'm not rich, I said. And it's not my wedding. He laughed. It's family, man. Come on. You know how much this means to Mom. Don't make this a big thing. When I refused again, his tone flipped instantly. You've always been selfish, he said. You think you're better than everyone just because you got lucky with a job. Whatever, man. We don't need you. That was the last time I heard from him for months. My parents stopped calling. Holidays came and went without so much as a text. I didn't go to the wedding. I wasn't even invited. But here's where things start to get interesting. About a year after all that, something happened at work. Our company was growing fast, and I'd just been promoted again, this time to CEO after our founder retired. I didn't brag about it. I just quietly got to work, trying to steer the company through expansion. Then one afternoon, my assistant, Jenna, buzzed me. Tyler, she said, there's a guy here asking to see you. Says his name is Ryan. For a second, I thought I misheard. Ryan, my brother? Yeah, she said. He doesn't have an appointment. Should I send him in? And that's when I froze, because I realized my brother, the same one who called me selfish and cut me off, was sitting in my lobby, asking for my help. I told Jenna, tell him the CEO doesn't take walk-ins. She hesitated. Are you sure? I smiled. I'm sure. Then I sat back in my chair, watching through the glass wall as she walked out to deliver the message. But what happened after that? Well, that's where things really started to unfold. Ryan didn't leave right away. Jenna told me later that he just sat there in the lobby, looking stunned. He asked her again, can you just tell him it's urgent? And she repeated what I told her, word for word. Sorry, the CEO doesn't take walk-ins. Apparently, he laughed nervously, like he thought it was some kind of joke. But when she didn't budge, his face changed. That same mix of frustration and disbelief I remembered so well from childhood settled right back onto his features. He left 10 minutes later, pacing back and forth before storming out of the building. I should have felt triumphant. Maybe I did, for about 30 seconds. But mostly, I just sat there, feeling that same old knot in my chest, the one that came every time my family twisted something around on me. Because I knew this wasn't over. With my family, nothing ever ended cleanly. That night, around 11 p.m., my phone lit up. It was my mom. For the first time in a year. I stared at the screen for a long time before picking up. Her voice came through sharp and cold, like no time had passed. Tyler, she said, what on earth did you do to your brother? I leaned back in bed, exhaling. What do you mean? He came home devastated, she snapped. You humiliated him in front of your staff. You're the CEO now, and that's how you treat family. I rubbed my eyes. Mom, he showed up unannounced, at my office, asking for a job. No resume, no call ahead, nothing. You can't just walk into a company and demand to see the CEO. You're his brother, she shouted. You're supposed to help him. What's wrong with you lately? Ever since you got that promotion, you've been acting like some big shot. I almost laughed. The irony of it all was absurd. Mom, do you remember when you cut me off for not paying for his wedding? She went quiet for a moment. Then, that's different. That was family business. This is petty. You should have talked to him. I stayed silent, because there was no point arguing with someone who'd already decided I was the villain. She kept talking, something about forgiveness, about family unity, but it all blended into static. The moment I hung up, I realized that my family didn't just misunderstand me. They needed me to be wrong. Because if I wasn't, they'd have to face all the years they'd treated me like the backup plan for everyone else's mistakes. But to understand why that moment hit so hard, I should probably go back a bit, to the months leading up to that phone call, when things between us really started to unravel. The first time I noticed the manipulation wasn't just financial, it was emotional. Right after I refused to pay for Ryan's wedding, my parents started this weird guilt campaign. I'd get calls from relatives, an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years, a cousin who only ever reached out when she needed something. They'd say things like, "Your mom's really stressed about the wedding," or "Ryan's been working so hard. Can't you just help a little?" It felt coordinated, like my parents were assigning people to wear me down. Then came the texts. My mom would send these passive-aggressive messages like, "Hope you're enjoying your fancy office while your family struggles," or "Your brother would have done it for you." My dad stayed quiet, but when he did speak up, it was worse. Disappointed, heavy-handed sentences like, "I didn't raise you to be selfish." For weeks, I tried to ignore it. I focused on work, kept my distance, told myself I was finally learning to set boundaries. But it's hard to fully detach from people who taught you what love was supposed to look like, even if they twisted the meaning along the way. Then one weekend, out of nowhere, Ryan called again. This was maybe 3 weeks before his wedding. "Look, man," he said, his voice suddenly all calm and reasonable. "I get it. You don't want to pay for everything. But maybe you could just help with the honeymoon? Like, just a few thousand?" It'd mean a lot to Mom. That's what always got me. The way he used her as leverage. It was never help me. It was help Mom. And when I refused again, his tone turned sharp. "You really think your money makes you better than us, huh? You forgot where you came from, Tyler." That line burned. It always did. Because no matter how much I achieved, they found a way to make it sound like a betrayal instead of something to celebrate. After that call, I stopped responding entirely. I skipped the wedding, stayed in the city, and spent that weekend working on a product pitch that ended up landing one of our biggest clients. Ironically, while my family toasted Ryan's big day, I was signing a deal worth more than his entire net worth. A few months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Ryan's marriage wasn't going so well. His business ventures had drained what little savings Emma had. Apparently, she was already working 2 jobs to cover their rent. When I asked if he was still working anywhere, the guy shrugged. Last I heard, he quit his warehouse job because he didn't like taking orders from people. Classic Ryan. Meanwhile, my parents kept up appearances. They posted about how proud they were of Ryan and his entrepreneurial spirit, while barely acknowledging me unless it was to show off my accomplishments to someone else. I became their favorite bragging point in public and their biggest disappointment in private. Then came Christmas. I hadn't been home since the wedding fiasco, but that year my dad called and said, "Let's start fresh." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I thought maybe, after all the silence, they'd mellowed out. When I walked into their house, everything felt staged, like they'd rehearsed the whole happy family thing. Ryan was there with Emma, though they barely spoke to each other. My mom hugged me like she was trying to prove something. The night started fine, small talk, food, polite laughter. Then, inevitably, money came up. "So, Tyler," my mom said, refilling my dad's glass, "I heard your company might be expanding overseas. That must be exciting." "Yeah," I said cautiously. "We're opening a branch in London next year." Ryan chuckled. "Man, must be nice to just walk into success like that." I put my fork down. "It wasn't luck, Ryan." He smirked. Sure. Some of us just weren't born with your charm, I guess." That's when my dad stepped in. "Ryan's trying to get his own business off the ground again," he said proudly. "He's got great ideas, just needs a little capital." And just like that, the trap was set. My mom leaned forward. "You could invest, Tyler. It's family, after all. You'd be helping your brother get back on his feet." I stared at them. "You've got to be kidding me." Ryan raised his hands like, "Hey, it's just an idea." But I could see the way his eyes lit up, like he already thought the money was his. "I'm not doing that," I said firmly. "I'm not mixing family and business." The air went cold. My mom's smile faded. "You've changed," she said softly, shaking her head. "Success has made you cold." And that was that. I left before dessert. On the drive back, I realized something that would stick with me. No matter how many chances I gave them, they'd always find a way to make me feel guilty for not letting them take advantage of me. After that, I cut off contact again, completely this time. No calls, no visits, no updates. I focused on work, built stronger friendships, and slowly stopped waiting for my parents to be proud of me for the right reasons. Then came the day in the lobby. The day Ryan came crawling back. When Jenna told me he was gone, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, he sent me an email. The subject line just said, "Please." The message was long and rambling. How he'd lost his job, how Emma had left him, how he was trying to get back on track. He said he'd applied for a marketing position at my company and asked if I could fast-track his application. Then came the kicker. "You owe me this after everything that happened with the family." I read that line 3 times, trying to wrap my head around the sheer audacity. I owed him. After years of being guilt-tripped, manipulated, and used? I didn't reply. Instead, I sat there in my office, remembering every moment they'd made me feel like I was the problem. Every time they'd said, "Family comes first," when what they really meant was, "You come last." And for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt, just clarity. But the thing about clarity is, it makes other people panic. And when Ryan realized I wasn't going to save him, he started getting desperate. And that's when things took a turn I didn't expect. I didn't hear from Ryan for about 2 weeks after that email, which honestly felt like a relief. I figured maybe he'd finally gotten the message that I wasn't his backup plan anymore. I was wrong. When my family goes quiet, it's never peace. It's the calm before the storm. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything started to unravel. I was in a meeting with our legal team about a new partnership deal, one of those make-or-break contracts that could expand the company globally, when my phone started buzzing nonstop. I ignored it at first, but it kept going. Call after call, message after message. Finally, during a short break, I glanced at my screen. 15 missed calls, all from my mom. I stepped into the hallway and called her back, heart already sinking. "Mom? What's going on?" Her voice came through shaky and breathless, like she'd been crying. "Tyler, thank God you answered. It's Ryan." My stomach tightened. "What about him?" He's in trouble. He said you're ruining his life." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped suddenly, her voice hardening. "You fired him." I blinked. "What?" "Ryan said you gave him a job at your company, and then you fired him for no reason. How could you do that to your own brother?" My jaw literally dropped. "Mom, I didn't hire him. I told you. I didn't even let him into my office. He doesn't work here." But she wasn't listening. "He told us he'd been working there for weeks. He said you humiliated him, made him do meaningless tasks, and then kicked him out like trash." For a second, I couldn't even find words. The anger hit so fast it almost made me laugh. Ryan had lied. Not just a small lie, a massive, orchestrated lie that dragged my parents back into his fantasy world. "Mom, listen to me," I said carefully. "That never happened. He's lying. He's not an employee here. We have security logs, ID badges, payroll systems. His name isn't anywhere in them." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in that voice she always used when she'd already chosen her side, she said, "I don't believe you." That's when I realized the truth didn't matter anymore. Not when it came from me. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a while, staring at the city skyline, trying to understand how my own family could twist reality so easily. Ryan wasn't just desperate. He was dangerous in that subtle, emotional way. The kind that doesn't need violence to destroy you, just manipulation. The next few days were chaos. My dad called once, didn't say much, just that I should do the right thing and make it right with my brother. Make what right? I hadn't done anything. It was like they were living in an alternate timeline. Then, over the weekend, it got worse. A friend from college, Megan, called me out of the blue. "Hey," she said carefully. "I just wanted to ask, are you okay?" "Yeah, why?" "Because your brother's been posting stuff about you online." That made my stomach drop. I pulled up Facebook, and there it was, Ryan's profile, filled with long, emotional posts about how I'd abused my power and destroyed his career. He made it sound like I'd personally sabotaged him. He even shared a fake story about me mocking him in front of junior employees. The post had hundreds of reactions and comments from old family friends saying things like, "Wow, success really changed him," and "That's heartbreaking, Ryan. Stay strong." He'd even tagged my parents in it. I could barely process it. I kept rereading his words, that smug self-pitying tone dripping from every line. He framed himself as the victim, painting this picture of a cold-hearted brother who'd sold his soul to money. He said things like, "Some people forget where they came from once they make it big. But I'll never stop being the loyal son who puts family first." I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking, not from sadness, but pure anger. It wasn't just about the lie anymore. It was the way he used my success as ammunition. The way he dragged my name through the mud for sympathy points. That weekend, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about everything that had led to this. Every time I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. every guilt trip I'd swallowed, every apology I'd made for things I didn't do. All those years of trying to be the bigger person had just taught them one thing, that I was an easy target. Monday morning, I walked into the office determined to put an end to it. I called Jenna into my office and told her to prepare a statement for HR and legal. I wanted everything documented: Ryan's visit, his behavior, the fact that he'd never been an employee. If he tried to use my company's name again, we'd have proof to shut it down. But before we could even finish drafting it, something else hit. An email from HR. The subject line: formal complaint, harassment allegation. My blood went cold. I opened it and immediately saw Ryan's name. He'd filed a complaint against me through the company's public contact form. It was so bizarre it almost didn't feel real. He claimed I'd offered him a job under false pretenses and verbally humiliated him when he came in for an interview. He even attached screenshots, fake emails, clearly fabricated, using a Gmail account with my name misspelled. The man had faked an entire paper trail. I remember sitting there in silence, my heart pounding, while Jenna looked at me wide-eyed. "He actually did this?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said quietly. "He did." That week turned into a blur of meetings with our legal department. They were on my side, of course. Everything he'd submitted fell apart under even basic scrutiny. But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. People whispered. A few employees asked questions. Some even believed the rumors. It hit me one evening when I stayed late at the office, alone with the city lights flickering through the windows. For the first time in my life, I realized my brother wasn't just lazy or entitled. He was capable of deliberate, calculated cruelty. He'd weaponized my own reputation, something I'd spent years building, just to make himself feel powerful again. Then came the final straw. About 2 weeks later, my mom called again. Her voice was softer this time, broken, almost. "Tyler," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something. But please don't get angry." I felt my stomach twist. "What is it?" "It's about your savings account. The one you opened years ago, the joint one with me, remember?" I froze. That account was something I'd opened when I first started working, back when I was sending money home to help with bills. I hadn't touched it in years. "Yeah," I said slowly. "What about it?" She hesitated. "Ryan needed help, just for a little while. He said he'd pay you back." My voice went flat. "Mom, what did you do?" "I let him use the account," she said quickly, like rushing the words would make them sound better. "He said you wouldn't mind. It was just temporary." I felt my pulse spike. "How much?" She didn't answer right away. "Mom, how much?" 22,000. It was like the air left the room. I didn't yell. I didn't even move. I just sat there, gripping my phone, hearing my heartbeat pounding in my ears. She started rambling. Something about how Ryan was going through a rough time, how family helps each other, how you have so much, Tyler. Every word felt like a punch. That account wasn't just money. It was years of discipline, nights I'd skipped dinners, side gigs I'd worked to stay afloat. It was mine, and they'd just taken it. When I finally spoke, my voice came out calm, too calm. "You had no right. You don't understand," she said softly. "He's your brother. He needed it." "I do understand," I said. "You stole from me." She gasped like I'd insulted her. "Don't say that. It wasn't stealing, it was family helping family." That's when it hit me how warped their definition of family really was. To them, love was just a currency, something they spent freely when it suited them, and borrowed against when they wanted more. I hung up. That night, I went to the bank and closed the account. Then I moved every remaining cent I had into a private business account only under my name. I remember the teller looking at me and saying, "Are you sure you want to remove the co-owner?" "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." When I got home, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought about all the years I'd wanted their approval, the way I'd let guilt dictate every decision. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me, like a door had finally closed. I wasn't their safety net anymore. But I should have known better than to think they'd accept that quietly. Because within a week, they found a new way to twist the knife. And that next move? That's when everything truly blew up. When I say that week broke me, I'm not exaggerating. I'd always thought I was pretty good at handling pressure, deadlines, negotiations, crises. But there's a difference between work stress and realizing your own family sees you as nothing but a wallet with legs. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just sting, it rearranges something in your chest. After the bank call, everything around me felt quieter. My apartment. Once a place that buzzed with energy, late-night work sessions, quiet jazz humming from the speakers, the skyline glowing through the windows, suddenly felt empty. I'd sit at my kitchen counter, staring at the phone, half expecting an apology that never came. Instead, the next morning, I woke up to my name trending on local social media. A post from my brother's account had gone viral, something along the lines of, "Some people think money makes them family. It doesn't. My brother might have everything, but he's forgotten his heart." Attached was a photo of me from years ago, at my college graduation, with Ryan and my parents smiling next to me. I looked happy then. The caption twisted it all. The day he still cared about family, before success ruined him. I remember staring at the post, watching comments roll in. Strangers taking sides. Old acquaintances chiming in with half-baked memories. Even a few coworkers saw it. Someone from the office forwarded it to HR, just in case. It was humiliating, not because anyone could prove any of it, but because I couldn't stop them from believing what they wanted to believe. That weekend, I didn't leave my apartment. I ignored calls, skipped meals, just walked in circles replaying everything in my head. Every word my mom had said, every lie Ryan had spun, every time I'd told myself things would get better if I just worked harder, gave more, forgave faster. I kept thinking about that phrase, family comes first. It used to make me proud. It used to mean unity, love, sacrifice. But now it just sounded like a weapon, something they used to corner me into compliance. The next Monday, I went to work early, mostly just to have somewhere to be. The office was quiet at that hour, still half dark. I poured myself a coffee and stood by the window, watching the city wake up. It hit me then how much of my life had revolved around earning their approval. Every late night, every promotion, every milestone, I'd always imagined their faces lighting up when I shared the news. And now I finally had everything I'd ever worked for, and no one left to share it with. Still, life doesn't stop for heartbreak. I buried myself in work. I told myself if I stayed busy enough, I wouldn't have time to feel angry. But deep down, I was unraveling. The stress started showing, sleepless nights, headaches, this constant pressure in my chest. My assistant, Jenna, noticed it first. "You okay?" she asked one afternoon after a meeting. "You've been zoning out a lot lately." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired. Long week." She didn't look convinced. "You've had a lot going on," she said softly. "If you need to take a few days." I shook my head. "No, I can't. Not now." Because that was the thing. Part of me was terrified to slow down. If I stopped working, I'd have to sit with the reality that my parents had stolen from me, that my brother had dragged my name through the dirt, and that I'd let them. Around that same time, my dad started calling again. I didn't answer the first few times. But then, late one night, after one too many sleepless hours, I picked up. "Tyler," he said, his voice low, almost defeated. "Your mom's not doing well." My stomach clenched. "What happened?" She's stressed. This whole thing with you and Ryan has taken a toll. You know how she gets. She's been crying a lot." I sighed. "Dad, she took my money." "I know," he said quietly. "She knows it too. But you can't hold a grudge forever. She did it for the right reasons." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that startled even me. "The right reasons? You're seriously saying stealing from your kid is right?" "Don't twist my words, son," he said sharply. "You've been distant. You don't understand what family means anymore. We've all made sacrifices. Yours just happened to be financial." That line stayed with me for days. Yours just happened to be financial. Like my pain wasn't real because it came with a bigger paycheck. Like success canceled out betrayal. After that, I stopped answering their calls entirely. I blocked Ryan on social media. I told HR to file every fake report from him into a legal record, just in case. I even changed my personal email. It felt drastic, but I needed to breathe again. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also, in a strange way, peaceful. That's when I started thinking about leaving. Not the city, but the cycle. I'd been living on their emotional leash for 31 years, and I was done. I started researching therapists who specialized in family trauma. I began journaling, something I hadn't done since college. It felt strange at first, writing down the anger, the confusion, the grief, but slowly it turned into clarity. One night, I wrote a line that stuck with me. "You can't heal in the same room where they keep reopening the wound." I taped that note to my bathroom mirror. Around that time, Ryan started reaching out again, this time through different numbers, fake email addresses, even mutual friends. He'd send messages that swung wildly between guilt and manipulation. Mom's sick, and it's your fault. Then, the next day, bro, I made mistakes. Just talk to me. I ignored them all, until one message stood out. He wrote, "You think you're better than me because you're the CEO. But remember, I can still ruin you." That one made my blood run cold. It wasn't a plea anymore, it was a threat. I printed it out, brought it straight to our legal department, and asked them to start documenting every contact attempt. They assured me they'd handle it discreetly, but I could tell even they were unsettled. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone left. I turned off the lights, just watching the reflection of the city in the glass. Somewhere deep down, a quiet thought surfaced, one that scared me a little. Maybe I'd lost my family years ago, and I was only just realizing it now. For the next few weeks, I kept my head down. I worked, I exercised, I met with a therapist twice a week. I started saying no to after-hours meetings, no to the endless pressure to keep performing like nothing had happened. I even went for long walks in the park near my apartment, just breathing, watching the world move around me without me needing to fix it. But even in those quiet moments, a part of me couldn't stop thinking. Planning. Not revenge, not yet. Something deeper. A reckoning. Because the truth was, I didn't want to hurt them. I wanted them to understand what they'd done, to feel the weight of it, to see that I wasn't the kid they could guilt into submission anymore. And the funny thing about rock bottom? Once you hit it, you stop being afraid of falling. So I started laying the groundwork. Quietly, carefully. I updated my will, moved my investments to trusts they couldn't access. I even hired a private accountant to audit every shared financial connection to my name. And it turned out the joint account wasn't the only thing Ryan had touched. There were credit cards, small loans, even online purchases tied to my old addresses. Things I'd never noticed because I trusted my family enough not to look too closely. It made me sick, but it also made things clear. For years, I'd been living under the illusion that love meant loyalty, that blood was thicker than betrayal. But that night, as I sat with those audit reports spread out across my desk, something inside me hardened. They'd taken from me in every way they could, emotionally, financially, even socially. So maybe it was time to take something back. Not through shouting, not through revenge posts or angry phone calls, but through silence, through power, through letting them see what life looked like when the person they'd drained for decades stopped giving. And I didn't realize it yet, but that decision, that quiet moment of resolve, would be the thing that changed everything. Because soon enough, life would bring us face to face again. And this time, I wouldn't be the one apologizing. If rock bottom was silence, then the rise was sound, the slow hum of rebuilding, the rhythm of life finally clicking into place without the weight of guilt dragging behind it. The strangest part was how ordinary it felt at first. There was no big cinematic moment, no montage of success set to triumphant music. It started with little things, a full night's sleep, a calm morning, the kind of peace that used to feel impossible. Work was still busy, but I started handling it differently. I stopped letting stress run my life. I delegated more, trusted my team, and let myself step back once in a while. My therapist called it reclaiming space. I called it breathing again. And for the first time in a long time, I started to enjoy what I'd built. Our company was in the middle of a massive expansion. The London branch launched ahead of schedule, the stock doubled, and suddenly I was getting invited to conferences, interviews, even panels about leadership. It all happened fast, but I didn't let it overwhelm me this time. I'd spent years chasing approval. Now I was building legacy. There's a difference between having power and understanding it. Before, I used to think leadership was about being responsible for everyone else. Now I realized it was about protecting what you've earned, not out of greed, but out of respect for your own effort. Every meeting, every decision, every late night I'd endured, it finally started to feel like it meant something. And the best part? I was doing it without them. No guilt calls, no manipulation, no emotional ambushes disguised as family dinners. I had peace, and that peace made me sharper, calmer, better. My assistant Jenna noticed it too. "You seem different," she said one afternoon while handing me a stack of reports. "Different how?" She smiled. "Lighter. Like you finally put something down you'd been carrying." She wasn't wrong. I'd started filling my life with things that didn't revolve around damage control, friends, hobbies, even travel. I took weekend trips to places I used to only see in magazines. I met people outside my usual circles, artists, writers, startup founders, people who didn't care about my title, just my ideas. And slowly, I started to realize that family doesn't always mean the people you're born to. Sometimes, it's the ones who see you clearly and still choose to stay. Then came the Forbes article. It was a profile piece, from small-town struggles to corporate success. They reached out after hearing about our expansion. Normally, I'd have declined. I hated the spotlight. But something inside me said yes this time. Not out of vanity, but out of reclamation. When the article came out, it was surreal. My photo, the one they'd taken in my office with the skyline behind me, ended up everywhere. My inbox flooded with congratulations. Old professors, co-workers, even college friends reached out. It was flattering, but also grounding. Because I knew what it had taken to get there. Every sleepless night, every family argument, every moment I'd almost given up. What I didn't expect was for it to reach my parents. A week after the article dropped, my mom sent me an email. Just one sentence. "We're so proud of you, honey. Let's talk soon." I stared at it for a long time. A year ago, that message would have made my chest tighten with hope. Now it just felt empty. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. I just left it there, unread, like a museum artifact from a different life. But silence doesn't stop gossip. Within a few days, I started hearing from mutual contacts that my parents were telling people they'd always known I'd make it big. They used my success as proof of their good parenting. One acquaintance even said my mom showed up at a church event with the magazine, bragging about her son, the CEO. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who'd once accused me of being selfish were now cashing in on my success. Not financially, but socially. It stung, but I didn't react. Because deep down, I was playing a longer game. Around that time, I started mentoring younger professionals, mostly kids from small towns like mine, people who reminded me of who I used to be. It felt good to help without being used. I helped them negotiate salaries, navigate toxic workplaces, build confidence. Every bit of advice I gave them felt like I was rewriting my own history, one sentence at a time. Then came an opportunity that changed everything, an offer from a major tech firm to merge with my company. It wasn't just a deal, it was a partnership that would triple our valuation, the kind of thing that could set me up for life. The board wanted me to lead the negotiations personally. For months, I worked on that deal like it was art. Every term, every clause, every projection, I made sure it was airtight. And when it finally went through, I stood in that same office where Ryan had once been turned away, and I watched the contract get signed. My company was now worth over $100 million. That night, I sat alone in the conference room after everyone had left, sipping champagne, staring out at the city lights. It should have felt like victory. It did in a way, but part of me wished I had someone, anyone, to share it with who didn't want something from me. Then, almost as if the universe was mocking me, my phone buzzed. A new message. From Ryan. "Congrats, bro, mom showed me the article. Guess you finally made it. I could use some help, just until I get back on my feet." I read it twice, then 3 times. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just the same old script. "You have something, I need something, so give it." I didn't reply, but for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, that clean, unshakable kind of distance you get when you've finally healed enough to see things clearly. Over the next few months, I built walls, not out of spite, but self-respect. I hired private legal advisors to make sure every trace of shared ownership, family-linked finance, and old joint accounts was permanently closed. I rewrote my will to include only charities and future scholarships. I even started a foundation in my name, one designed to fund students from underprivileged families who wanted to study business or marketing. It was strange. All those years my parents said family comes first, and here I was, finally living by that phrase in a way they never could. I was creating a family out of people who deserved it. My therapist once told me that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about changing what you do with the memory. I didn't want to erase my past anymore. I wanted to turn it into something useful. And that's exactly what started to happen. My company grew. The foundation took off. We started sponsoring education programs and youth mentorship projects. I began speaking at small-town schools, telling kids that success isn't about where you come from. It's about what you're willing to unlearn. By then, it had been almost 2 years since I'd spoken to Ryan or my parents. I'd built a new life, one that didn't revolve around constantly fixing other people's chaos. I'd built something solid, something untouchable. Then, one morning, Jenna came into my office looking uneasy. "There's someone here asking to see you," she said carefully. I looked up from my laptop. "Who?" She hesitated. "Your brother." For a long time, I didn't say anything. Just sat there, feeling the weight of that name hang in the air. "Does he have an appointment?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "No. He just walked in. Said he needs to talk to you." I leaned back in my chair, the faintest trace of a smile forming on my lips. "Tell him the CEO doesn't take walk-ins." Jenna blinked. Same as before. Same as before. But this time, it wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was in control. I'd rebuilt everything they tried to break. Still, as I watched Ryan sitting out there in the lobby again, slumped over, worn down, probably thinking he could talk his way back into my good graces, something inside me shifted. Because what he said next, when he finally found another way to reach me, would change everything I thought I knew about revenge, forgiveness, and family. And this time, I wouldn't be the one waiting. For a long while, I didn't move. I just sat there at my desk, staring out through the glass walls of my office, watching my brother, the same person who once called me selfish, the same person who stole from me, sitting nervously in my lobby. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in spirit. His clothes were wrinkled, his posture slumped. The self-satisfied smirk that used to live on his face had been replaced by something closer to fear. Jenna had that hesitant look she got whenever she wasn't sure how far to push. "You want me to tell him to leave?" she asked. I took a slow breath. "Not yet," I said. "Let him sit." I turned back to my laptop, pretending to read emails, but I could feel him out there. The same way you can feel static in the air before a thunderstorm. Every few minutes, I glanced up. He was still there, fidgeting, checking his phone, running his hand through his hair. At one point, he stood up and paced near the door, looking toward my office like he wanted to knock, but couldn't quite bring himself to. Part of me wanted to walk out there, tell him exactly what he'd done to me, list every lie, every manipulation, every dollar he'd stolen. Every night, I'd stayed up wondering why my own family saw me as an ATM instead of a person. But another part of me, the part that had learned patience, the part that understood power, knew that silence would cut deeper. So I waited. After about 40 minutes, Jenna came back in, holding a note. "He said if you won't see him, to at least read this." I nodded. "Leave it on the desk." She did, and after she left, I just stared at that folded piece of paper for a long time before finally opening it. The handwriting was messy, rushed. "Tyler, I know you don't want to see me, but please, I need your help. I messed up. I lost everything. My job, my apartment, Emma's gone, and I've got nowhere left to go. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I swear I'm trying to change. I need a fresh start. I just need someone to give me a chance. Please, man. You're all I have left." There it was again. That phrase, "you're all I have left." I sat there rereading it, feeling nothing at first. No sympathy, no pity, just quiet recognition. He wasn't really saying I'm sorry. He was saying I need something. It was the same rhythm, the same script my family had been using my whole life. The apology was just packaging for the request. But this time, something different sparked inside me. Not anger, clarity. I'd spent years reacting to them, playing defense against their guilt, their chaos, their manipulation. But what if I stopped reacting? What if I used their own expectations, their greed, their desperation against them? The thought came quietly, almost like a whisper at first. But once it appeared, it didn't go away. That's when the idea started to take shape. The merger deal had left me in an incredibly powerful position. As CEO of the newly combined company, I had influence, money, and resources. But more than that, I had control over information, over narratives, over who got access to what. And my brother? He was at the lowest point in his life, probably more desperate than he'd ever been. That meant for the first time in decades, the power dynamic had completely flipped. For once, I had leverage, but I wasn't going to use it out of spite. No, I wanted something cleaner than revenge. Something that would force him and my parents to see exactly who they'd been all along. I started with small steps. I told Jenna to send Ryan an automated rejection email from HR, thanking him for his interest in the company, but stating there were no suitable positions available at this time. It wasn't cruel, it was professional, predictable. But I knew Ryan wouldn't stop there. He never did. Sure enough, a week later, I got another message from him. This one was longer, angrier. I don't understand why you're doing this. I'm trying to make things right. You think you're better than me just because you have money? I'm your brother. You could change my life with one call, and you won't. What happened to you? I didn't reply. Then, 3 days later, another one. If you won't help me, maybe mom and dad will. I'll tell them you're still holding a grudge. You know they'll believe me. That line, you know they'll believe me, hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. They would. They always did. And that's when the real plan began forming. I wanted the truth out, not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever heard their version of things. But I wasn't going to yell or argue or try to convince anyone. I was going to let their own words, their own actions, reveal everything. I started collecting things, emails, messages, old bank records, copies of transfers from the joint account my mom had accessed. I had proof of every withdrawal, every unauthorized payment. I even pulled the fake harassment complaint Ryan had filed through my company, complete with the IP address traced back to his old apartment. It was all there, years of evidence showing exactly what they'd done. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to a journalist I'd met during the Forbes interview, a guy named Daniel who'd since started a podcast series about modern family dynamics and financial manipulation. His show had gone viral a few months earlier for exposing stories about siblings using successful family members for money. I didn't give him names at first, just the outline of a story. Say you had a case, I told him, where a family exploited their son's success for years, guilt tripped him into paying for everything, even stole from him. Would you cover that? He laughed. That's half of my inbox these days. But yeah, if you've got receipts, I'd run it. I told him I'd be in touch. Meanwhile, work kept growing. Our company was now expanding into Asia, and my name was becoming more public than ever. Every new success made the contrast between me and my family sharper and more ironic. They'd once called me selfish for chasing independence, and now the very independence they despised had made me untouchable. But success has a strange gravity to it. It attracts people you thought you'd left behind. One night, around 10 p.m., I was in my office finishing up a report when I got another email, this time from my mom. The subject line read, "We need to talk about your brother." I opened it, bracing myself. "Tyler, your father and I are very worried about Ryan. He's been through a lot. He said you've been ignoring him and that he came to your office, but you refused to see him. I know things have been tense, but please, don't turn your back on family. We all make mistakes. I'm begging you, give him another chance." There it was again, the same word they'd always used as both shield and weapon, family. I closed the email without replying. But that night, as I sat in the dark, I realized something important. They still believed they could guilt me back into submission. They hadn't learned a thing. And that's when the idea crystallized completely. If they wanted to keep pretending they were victims, I was going to show them what real accountability looked like. Not through shouting or lawsuits, but through exposure, through truth. Over the next few weeks, I began preparing everything meticulously. I had the legal documentation verified, the transfers time-stamped, and the email exchanges authenticated. I reached out to Daniel again, this time with details. We agreed to anonymize names, at least initially. He'd run the story as a cautionary tale about family entitlement and financial abuse. But there was one more thing I wanted to do before going public. I wanted to see Ryan one last time, not to reconcile, but to set the stage. So, a week later, I had Jenna reach out to him. "Tell him," I said, "that I'm willing to meet." Her eyebrows shot up. "You sure?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's time." We scheduled the meeting for a Friday afternoon, after hours, when most of the office would be empty. When the day came, I remember feeling surprisingly calm. My therapist had told me to picture moments like this not as confrontations, but as closures. And that's exactly how I approached it. Ryan showed up 20 minutes late, as usual. When he walked in, he looked older, worn down, like life had been chewing on him. His hair was unkempt, his shirt half-tucked, and the smell of cheap cologne lingered in the air. He tried to smile. "Hey man, sit down," I said. He hesitated, then did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city buzzed faintly outside the windows. Finally, he said, "I know you hate me, and I get it, but I'm not the same person anymore. I've been trying to get my life together. I just need a break. One chance." I folded my hands. "And what happens if I give it to you?" He looked down. Then I'll pay you back. I'll make things right. I can't do it alone anymore. I nodded slowly, pretending to think. You remember what you said to me after I refused to pay for your wedding? He frowned. No. You said I was selfish. That I thought I was better than you. That you didn't need me. He shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, I was angry. I didn't mean it. I know, I said softly. But I did. His eyes snapped up, confusion flashing across his face. What do you mean? I said, leaning forward slightly. You were right about one thing. I am better, not because of money, but because I stopped blaming everyone else for my own failures. For a second, he just sat there, stunned. I smiled faintly. But I'll tell you what. You want a second chance? I'll give you one. Just not the kind you're expecting. His eyebrows knitted. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out, I said quietly. He left that night confused, but I could tell, deep down, a part of him knew something was coming. And he was right. Because what happened next would make every betrayal before look small. Ryan must have spent the entire night wondering what I meant when I said, you'll find out. I could almost picture him pacing in whatever tiny apartment he'd managed to find, replaying our conversation, trying to decode it. The truth was, I wanted him to. I wanted that uncertainty to eat at him the same way his manipulation used to eat away at me. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was orchestrating. The next week was the quiet before the storm. Everything was ready. The journalist, Daniel, had finalized the episode about financial abuse within families. He'd agreed to run it as part of a series called Blood and Balance, When Family Crosses the Line. I'd given him the green light. The names were anonymized at first, but everything else was verifiable. The bank statements, the emails, the fake complaint, even voice messages from my parents pressuring me to be a good son and pay for Ryan's wedding. It wasn't vengeance by rumor. It was vengeance by truth. But before the episode aired, I had one more move to make. I called my parents. It was the first time I'd spoken to them in over 2 years. The line rang twice before my mom picked up, her voice hesitant. Tyler. Yeah, it's me. A pause, then a flood of emotion. Oh, honey, I've been praying you'd call. I knew you'd come around. Ryan said you two talked. We're so glad. I'm not calling to reconcile. I interrupted. My tone was calm, but firm. I'm calling to tell you something important. The warmth in her voice cooled instantly. What is it? I know about the joint account, I said evenly. The transfers, the loans, everything. I have proof of it all. Dead silence. Then she said, very quietly, we were only trying to help him. I know, I said. And that's exactly what's going to ruin you. Excuse me. You'll see, I said and hung up. It was cruel, maybe, but I wasn't after comfort anymore. I was after clarity. 3 days later, the podcast episode dropped. I didn't even have to promote it. The internet did it for me. Daniel had done an incredible job weaving together the story. A successful professional from a small town manipulated by his family, guilt-tripped into financial dependence, betrayed, and finally reclaiming his autonomy. It was raw, emotional, and painfully relatable. Within hours, it climbed into the top 10 podcasts on Spotify. By the end of the first day, tens of thousands of listeners had tuned in. By the end of the week, it was over 1 million. And though no names were mentioned, everyone who knew my family could connect the dots. Our town wasn't big. Word spreads fast. My parents' friends started whispering. Old acquaintances stopped returning their calls. And then, someone, probably a mutual contact, leaked one of Ryan's old social media posts, the one where he accused me of firing him for no reason. People compared it to what was said in the podcast and realized he'd fabricated half of it. The tide turned overnight. While they'd spent years weaponizing gossip, now gossip was eating them. Ryan tried to fight back online at first. He posted vague rants about lies and jealousy. But every time he did, someone would link the podcast episode underneath. Comment sections filled with people saying things like, sounds like projection, dude, or maybe don't steal from your own brother next time. My parents, meanwhile, tried to do damage control the old-fashioned way. Phone calls, letters, church gossip. But it was too late. Their reputation was gone. They'd spent so long building their social identity around being the proud parents of the successful son that the moment that story turned against them, they had nothing left to hide behind. I didn't need to lift a finger. Truth had done the work for me. A few weeks later, I heard from a former neighbor that Ryan had been fired from his latest job. Apparently, his employer didn't appreciate the sudden attention or the dishonest behavior tied to his name. Word had spread far enough that his face had become recognizable, not famous, but infamous. And my parents? They stopped trying to call. I think at some point, they realized that no amount of guilt could rebuild what they'd burned. But my story didn't end with them falling apart. The real closure came from what happened afterward, the ripple effect. Because that podcast episode started something bigger. People began writing in, sharing their own experiences of family entitlement and financial abuse. Daniel called me one afternoon and said, "You started a movement, man. We're getting hundreds of messages from people saying your story gave them the courage to finally stand up for themselves." That was when it hit me. My revenge had turned into something much larger. I wasn't just closing a chapter. I was rewriting the narrative for everyone who'd ever been told that loving your family meant letting them drain you dry. The foundation I'd started months before, the one for students, suddenly gained traction. Donations poured in. We rebranded it with a new slogan: "You don't owe your family your future." It became more than just a scholarship fund. We started offering mentorship for young professionals dealing with toxic family pressure, workshops on financial independence, even legal resources for victims of financial manipulation. It became my purpose. And then, one day, karma did the rest. I was in the middle of a board meeting when Jenna slipped a note onto my desk. "Ryan's here again." I exhaled slowly. "What does he want this time?" She hesitated. "He's not here to ask for money. He says he wants to apologize." That was new. I told her to let him in. When he walked in, he looked like a shadow of who he used to be. His eyes were tired, his clothes worn. He sat down quietly, no arrogance, no smirk, just a deep, tired sadness. "I know you don't want to hear it," he started, "but I'm sorry." I studied him for a long moment. "For what?" "For all of it," he said. "The lies, the posts, the money. I thought if I could make you look bad, I'd feel better about myself. But I didn't. I made everything worse. Mom and Dad won't even talk to me anymore. Everyone in town knows what I did. I don't know how to fix it." There was a time I would have melted hearing that. A time I would have offered him money, or help, or at least forgiveness. But not now. "You can't fix it," I said quietly. "You can only live with it." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I deserve that." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the desk. "You know, Ryan, for a long time I thought forgiveness meant letting go of what someone did to you. But now I realize it means letting go of the power they had over you. I don't hate you anymore. I just don't need you anymore." He swallowed hard. "So that's it. That's it." He stood slowly, nodded once, and left without another word. When the door closed behind him, I sat there for a long time, just listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. There was no thrill, no cinematic satisfaction, just peace. A few months later, my parents sold the house I grew up in. I heard they moved to another town, smaller, quieter, away from the people who used to admire them. They never reached out again. And honestly, I didn't need them to. Because by then, I'd learned something important. Closure doesn't come from getting an apology. It comes from realizing you don't need one to move on. In the end, I didn't just get revenge. I got freedom. Freedom from their expectations. Freedom from their guilt. Freedom from the idea that love means sacrifice. And when people ask me how I managed to forgive them, I tell them the truth. I didn't forgive them to make peace with them. I forgave them to make peace with myself. The podcast went on to win an award for investigative storytelling. My foundation grew into one of the top mentorship networks for young professionals. I met people who understood me, not because of what I'd achieved, but because of what I'd survived. And sometimes, when I walk through my office and catch my reflection in the glass, I think back to that first moment. Ryan in the lobby, waiting for me. I used to see that as the day I got revenge. Now, I see it as the day I finally stopped waiting for my family to become people they never would be. Because the truth is simple. Sometimes walking away is the revenge. And when you walk far enough, you realize you were never running from them. They were running from the truth. That's when you finally win.